all the time.
God is good.
Amen. Well, quite a sermon this morning. Kind of reminds us there is another place other than heaven, isn't it? I wanted to bring up something and see if y'all are interested and if you'd like to do this. Years ago, my other class in October would always have a breakfast on a Saturday morning, and it was for Pastor's Appreciation, because October is Pastor's Appreciation Month. And so I'd like to start that back, and I'd like for our class to start it. I've talked with another class, not my previous one, but Terry Greniger's class, and they would like to help us too. So I'd like to do it like maybe the second Saturday in October, if everybody's interested, if you would like to do that. Does that sound like something would get behind and do? Do I see a lot of nods? Or
Where did you have it? Where was the breakfast?
Where?
Uh-huh.
We usually had it over here.
At worship.
Yeah. And what I thought this year is, we used to have the men would come in and we would have grills and we'd cook griddles, not grills, excuse me. We'd cook the breakfast and all that. But I'm thinking more or less, let's just get it catered. I think breakfast catered would be a lot cheaper than dinner or something like that. I don't know, but we could call Nicole's visit and see what it would cost there per person. And we could either just take a collection and pay for it or pay at the door. But I just think it'd be a nice thing to do this year. And we got enough time to plan it if we start now and get it done.
Have you checked the availability on that day? Before we can set a day, we have to check availability.
Yeah, I'll call the pastor and see.
Where will the
Well-
building be at that time? Will they be tearing that on which point?
I doubt it. I doubt it by then. He said that wouldn't start till probably the first of the year.
Okay.
So we should be okay.
So that's on the 12th? Did you say October 12th?
Well, the second Saturday, whatever
Well,
that
that's
is.
the 12th.
Is that the 12th?
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to have to have a marriage council. I know.
What
I
else?
just sit there.
Yeah, right.
Bert, I thought we was going to start this at the end of this month or next month.
Start what?
Is that changed? This addition, is
Oh.
that changed to the first of the year now?
Well, no, that's what I thought he said it would start.
Oh,
Maybe I'm wrong.
maybe I'm wrong.
But if they have to, we still have to have access over there.
Starting now.
We'd still have access over there. It wouldn't,
Yeah.
because they're gonna have the church there. Okay, let's get started. Genesis chapter 37. Are you ready? Everybody there? Hurry. Look at verses 1 and 2. Now, Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. So we see at the beginning of this that this is the history of Jacob. Although after this, we don't hear about Jacob. But what that's saying is that this verse 1, and probably should have been the end of chapter 36, or 35 actually, because 36 was all of Esau's relatives and such. So this brings an end really to the history of Jacob. Now he's still mentioned here, but the focus is going to be on Joseph from now on. And when you read and we study Joseph, what we're going to find is a likeness of Jesus Christ. I don't know if he would be called a Christ type, but he certainly lives a life as Christ would live. And it's hard to find any faults in Joseph. You know, you read his story and you think, man, he's a forgiving man. He just is different. So He was 17 years old as this begins. And it's the beginning of Joseph's story. And it's really one of the most remarkable stories in the Bible.
Yep.
It's been said that Enoch's life embodied the walk of faith. Noah's showed us the perseverance of faith. Abraham ultimately was the obedience of faith. Isaac's life had the power of faith. Jacob's life mostly the discipline of faith. But Joseph's life will show us the triumph of faith. And that's really true. He was a faithful man. And throughout Joseph's life, he never complained and he never compromised. And that's a good thing. James Montgomery Boyce, B-O-I-C-E, Boyce, said of Joseph, he was loved and hated, favored and abused, tempted and trusted, exalted and abased. Yet at no point in the 110 years life of Joseph did he ever seem to get his eyes off God or cease to trust him. Adversity did not harden his character. Prosperity did not ruin him. He was the same in private as in public and was truly a great man. And I might add, he was also a great example of how we're to live a godly life today. Most important, as we will see through his life, Joseph is a picture of Christ. He really is. Now it says in verse 2 that Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. He was feeding the flock with his brothers, and apparently they did something. We don't know what it is. We're not told. But Joseph didn't like what they were doing and knew his father probably wouldn't like it, and he came back and told them. Now, in this particular phrase, it says, brought a bad report to his father. The phrase here is, now I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I'm going to do it with a southern accent, okay? Debat Raha. Sounded like I knew what I was talking about, didn't it? When debat is used elsewhere in Genesis, it's associated with something misleading or slanderous. Raha is broad, but can imply something hurtful, miserable, disagreeable, or even wicked. So whatever it was they were doing was probably pretty bad. And that's why Joseph came back and told his father. Now look at verses 3 and 4. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now, this is where that famous hymn, A Coat of Many Colors, sung by Dolly Parton, came from. Come on, you're supposed to laugh at that one. Gee.
Coke came from that situation. Like,
No,
But,
her background, didn't it?
Anyway.
Same part of it.
Now, don't go there. Israel or Jacob loved Joseph more than all his children. Jacob had sons from 4 different mothers, but just 2 were from the one he loved. That was Rebekah. And the firstborn, of course, was Joseph, which he called the son of his old age. And for this reason, Joseph was favored by Jacob. And he did not hide his favoritism. That led to Jacob making Joseph a tunic of many colors. I'm going to stop there a minute. How many men back in those times, do you think made clothing? I wouldn't think there'd be a lot. But if you remember, when Jacob was growing up, Esau was a hunter, and who was Jacob? He was mama's boy. And so I think he probably learned how to make clothes too, because he made them, or he made Joseph, a tunic of many colors. So Joseph knew he was favored. And it seems like the tunic was an outward display of his favoritism toward Joseph. Now, according to Boyce, the real idea behind the ancient Hebrew phrase tunic of many colors is that it was a tunic extending all the way down to the wrist and all the way down to the ankles, as opposed to a shorter one. And that tunic would show a position of favor or princely standing and birthright. It was a showy way of stating, this is the son who receives the birthright. The real idea behind the ancient Hebrew phrase tunic of many colors is that it was a tunic that extended way down to the wrist and the ankles, as opposed to a shorter one. This was not a working man's robe. It was a garment of privilege and status. And the man who wore a tunic of many colors watched others as they did hard physical labor. So they would have been uppity. And that's what Joseph was. He was the favored. In verse 4, it says, they hated him, could not speak peaceably to him. Because of the favoritism, the brothers just hated him. And he became a source of conflict within the family, I'm sure. And because of that. And so bringing a bad report back to their father didn't increase their love toward him, I can assure you. So look at verses 5 through 8. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brother said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Joseph had a dream, and he tells his brother, and the dream's not a good dream for the brothers, obviously. And I don't know what he was thinking. They hated him already, and he's going to tell them this. But he told them. You know, I think Joseph just had an innocent mind. He was kind of naive about things. So he told them, and it made them even hate him more. Now, dreams still happen today, and people still have dreams. And I believe sometimes people have dreams and attribute it to God when it really isn't from God. Doesn't happen that often anymore. However, it does happen. And we hear stories all the time now of Muslims dreaming dreams and seeing Jesus in their dreams and coming to know Christ that way. But see, I think that's something special God is doing at the end time now to bring people back to him. Look, all the Mid-Easterners, they're all related somehow out of Abraham, as are we, in fact. We all come from Noah and his family, and before that, Adam and Eve. So he told it, and he says, please hear this dream. Where am I at? Oh, let's go to 5 and 8. Did I read that already?
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrible being old. You can't remember 5 minutes after what you did it, when you did it.
It's the alternative.
So they asked him this.
Not necessarily.
Everything's new though. That's what's nice, you know.
You can watch a movie 20 times.
Yeah. He says in verse 8, the brother, shall you indeed reign and have dominion over us? You ask yourself why Joseph would share that to him. Now, we're not told whether or not this was a dream from God. Joseph never said it, never claimed that it was from God. But it seems as though the brothers thought it must be. From what they heard, they interpreted it real quick. Meant they were going to serve him. So my question, what do you think? Was that a dream from God?
It's definitely prophecy.
Yeah, I think so. Whether it was from God or not, the outcome's going to work good for God, because that's the way God works. You know, I've mentioned this before, but God is outside of time. And I've always tried, how do you explain that? Because God sees everything, and everything that's happening is with our free will. But because he knows it, when something happens that it shouldn't have happened, he makes that thing happen to where it's going to come out to what he knows it's going to happen. And you say, how do you explain that? And it dawned on me the other night. If you're standing on a 20-story building and you're looking out and you see a road 3 miles long and you see a car traveling this way and you see another car traveling this way and they're in the same lane, you know what's going to happen, right? And if you were God and knew that, you could change it if you wanted to. You can make that car, make a ball roll out in the road and this car change the lane so they would miss each other. And that's what it means to be outside of time. You have a perspective everybody else doesn't have. And so when these things happen in Joseph's life, we see them differently because we're inside time and that's all we know. But God's watching all this. And he's not going to let his plan fail because he's God. God's greater than we are. So look at 9 through 11. If one dream wasn't bad enough, now there's another one. And you would think, Joseph, don't tell anybody. But no, listen. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I've dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you've dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brother indeed come to you, bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. What are you doing, Joseph? First dream set was bad enough. They were upset over that and hated him even more, it said. And now Joseph apparently lacks the gift of tact. The first dream set him above his brother, but this one sets him above his mother and father. The sun and the moon being his father and mother, and the 11 stars his brother. The idea of the stars, moon, and sun representing the family of Israel is not uncommon or unheard of. In Revelation 12:1, it says, now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun with the moon under her feet and on her head a garland of 12 stars. So you see, it's not rare that this would be used that way. And that's what Joseph sees in his dream. And then Jacob says, shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come bow down to you before the earth? Bow down to the earth before you? Even his father, who loved him dearly, was offended by the dream that Joseph had. He just couldn't understand how Joseph could be exalted higher than his own father and mother. So how does this happen? We don't know. How is it that he gets dreams like this?
God gives them.
God talks
He
to him.
continues. He was like,
So why Joseph? Because Joseph is chosen. He may not know it, but he's chosen. Listen, you're chosen. Each one of us has been chosen by God. The Bible clearly states that. Being his chosen, we hear from God, not necessarily in dreams, but we hear from him with the Spirit within us. And like Randy this morning was saying, we're influenced by the Spirit, and that Spirit is for us to influence others. Joseph was a great influence. I don't know that I'm such a great one. But the brothers are going to hate him more But in verse 11, it says, but his father kept the matter in mind. He was going to think about it a while. And I just imagine after he thought about it a while, he might have realized what's going on. We're not told. But he knew that his family was chosen. And so Joseph could have been chosen for something special. Verses 12 through 17. Then his brother went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Then he said to him, please go and see if it's well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. The man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? So he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they're feeding the flock. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let's go north to Dothan. And Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. He found his brothers feeding the flock in Dothan. And they were supposed to be in Shechem. So at the age of 17 now, Joseph sends him off, or Jacob sends Joseph to find out about his brothers, see what they're doing, see if they're okay. So why Shechem? Remember what happened in Shechem? The brothers went in and killed everybody because they raped their sister. I wouldn't think that'd be a safe place to go, but they killed all the men, I think, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So they go there anyway. And so here comes Joseph to find them. He says, will you please go and see if it's well with your brothers and well with the flocks? Apparently Jacob's blind to the hatred of his sons for Joseph, and sends Joseph to check on them. Now, Joseph's a brave young man because he knows how they hate him. But he goes, he follows his father's orders, and there he goes. He sends him alone all the way to the valley of Hebron, north toward Shechem, to find his brothers. If Joseph knows his brothers are dangerous, he does not tell his father. He should have. And the father should have known and sent somebody with him, you would think, one of his servants or something. But that didn't happen. In fact, we never hear Joseph say his brothers hate him. He never runs to daddy about it. But he knows they do. They've told him. They've let him know they hated him. He arrives in the area in verse 15 and 17 where his brothers is, but he can't find them. And a stranger there tells him where they are. They've gone north to Dothan, not Alabama. Don't get mixed up there. Look at verse 18. Now when they saw him afar off, this is the brothers, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Look, these brothers are not afraid of murder. We know that, don't we? It's really shocking to me they didn't conspire to tease him or to bully him or even to beat him up. They conspired to kill him, their own brother. They were of the flesh. They weren't a good witness for God at all. What would Paul say about this? Let's go to the New Testament. You don't have to turn there, but Ephesians 4:17, Paul's talking to Ephesus about the way you walk in the Lord. Now, the way we walk in the Lord is no different than the way a Jewish person should walk in God. Not a bit of difference. They should follow the Ten Commandments, and that's what Christ came to fulfill. And we're to follow him, so we would be walking like a Jew should walk, And they should walk like us, shouldn't they? Except we don't do all the sacrifices. So Paul said, thus I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk. Now, to a Jew, a Gentile was a heathen. Anybody who wasn't a Jew was a Gentile. The same as us. Anybody who's not a Christian is a lost person. In other words, do not walk as an unbeliever. And that Paul continues. He says, in the futility of their minds. That's delusions. They're delusional. Having their understanding darkened, having no concept of righteousness, being alienated from the life of God, no moral influence, because of the ignorance that is in them, not knowing the peace that it is in God. And because of the blindness of their hearts were not open to the light of God. And here's the key phrase, who being past feeling, they have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. Point I want to make is these brothers were past feeling. In other words, they had sinned so much and had sin in their life and enjoyed it until they have gone past the feeling of conviction of sin. I mean, even lost people do bad things and they feel bad about it. But there comes a point when you sin so much, you just get into a place where you've passed feeling on it. You don't care. It's just in your blood to sin. And that's where these boys were. Their sin in their heart before was there before they even acted it out. Sin problem begins in the heart, and it's got to be dealt with from the inside out. Our goal is not only to change our behavior, but to allow God to change our heart. He changed it for a little bit when you got saved, but he continues to change it as you're living. And so we have to open our heart to him and let him change our actions. Look at 19 and 20. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. The dreamer is coming, mocking him. That's what they were doing. They were being snooty, or however. But that's just the way they were. Verse 20 says, we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. That deceitful gene from Jacob has really passed down. And they're going to tell their father a big lie. But this is carrying it to the next level. Their plan would devastate Jacob, and they knew it. They didn't care about their father's feelings either. They were as angry with their father because he was showing favoritism to Joseph. We shall see what becomes of his dreams. And that's snooty. I can't help but believe this statement was made that way. Knowingly or not, they were mocking the plan of God and trying to defeat his will for Joseph's life. But that will never happen. And it will be proven out over time. Verses 21 and 22. But Reuben heard it. Now remember, Reuben, he did something bad. Remember that? He went in with one of his, was it Bilhah that he went in to and laid with her? Anyway, but Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into the pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So Reuben's the good guy here. He's changed his ways a little bit, maybe. He wants to save his brother. That certainly was, and was an awful act that they were going to do, kill them and throw them in there. But this was a good act of Reuben. That was good news. But Joseph never knew this was going on. All behind his back. Now, the purpose of him saying, let's not kill them, but just throw them in the pit, was to appease them, but not shed blood. And he was going to come back, apparently, because it says that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. Reuben had morals, more so than the boys did. The other brothers. They had planned to kill Joseph, but Reuben's plan was to return him to his father. His intentions were honorable. It wouldn't work out that way, but they were honorable. So let's look at 23 through 25. So it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on the way to carry them down to Egypt. Now notice the first thing they do. They strip that tunic of many colors right off of them. I think they hated that, and that was the first thing they wanted to do, to show him who they are. Then they took them and they cast them into the pit. It said there was no water in it, so I'm assuming it's an old dried up well. And if it was a well, and they had to throw him in it, it was deep enough, he could have been hurt just being thrown in it. Apparently he wasn't. God protected him from that. So there must have been the possibility of him being injured, though. But they didn't care. They wanted to kill him. So if he got hurt, what would they care? And then, of all things, they sat down and ate a meal. Can you imagine that? How cold is that? Enjoying a meal after they've thrown their own brother into a well, just to leave him there to die. You can't be any more wicked than that, can you? Well, yeah, Jeremiah thinks so. The heart's deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? The very people you would never think would do something can do it, because the heart's wicked. And we have to remember that. We saw that Saturday night, didn't we? What was he, 20 years old? 20 years old, trying to kill a man. We still don't know why. We don't know much about it at all, really, other than what we've seen on videos. But that's the wickedness of man. He sat down, ate a meal. What we are not told here, and I think is very relevant to the action, is that Joseph pleaded with them not to do this. And how I know that is Genesis 42:21. This is the brothers. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. This is later on when they come to see Joseph, and they're scared to death. And they find an amazing man that's willing to forgive them. But he pleaded with them before they threw him in the well. And then they went and had a meal. It wasn't a McDonald's burger, I can tell you. While they were eating, they lifted their eyes and looked up, and there was a company of Ishmaelites. I don't think that was a coincidence, do you? Now, what are Ishmaelites? Has the name Ishmael in it, doesn't it? Well, my first thought that was from his relatives, but later on we see they were Midianites, and I'll explain that when we get down there. So Look at verse 26 through 28. So Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Then the Midianite traders passed by and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. So Judah steps in and says, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Well, do you want to get profit for killing somebody? I mean, that's all against God totally. You don't profit from killing, from murder. So he said, well, if we're going to kill them, let's make some money on this thing. That doesn't sound right, does it? Seems as though Judah thought it was that if they were going to get rid of Joseph, then why not make some money on it? If they were to conceal his blood, then certainly they ought to profit. Duh. That's terrible. In verse 27 through 28, conveniently, some traders just happened to come by. Again, God's looking down and he's seeing what's happening, and he's going to make things work out. Free will is at work, but God will change the results of the free will. That's what we have to remember. He changes the results. You still have the free will. And sometimes he lets your free will get you to where you're going, where you want to go. Now, the specific group passing by are referred to as Midianite traders. Here's what scholars say, and I'm, of course, one of them. So they suggest that by this point in history, nomadic tribes in the region were referred to as Ishmaelites, whether they were specifically descendants from Hagar's son or not. This group of nomads were Midianites, descendants from Abraham's concubine Keturah. And I got that from Bible reference commentary. But the point being, as they threw them in the well, that God had made a way for him to get out and get to Egypt, where he's supposed to be. Amazing. Verses 29 through 32. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes, and returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more, and I, where shall I go? So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, dipped the tunic in the blood, and they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it back to their father and said, we have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? This whole story is messed up here. I want you to think about it a while. As was the custom, in mourning, Reuben tore his clothes when he saw that he was gone. He had stood up for Joseph by talking to his brothers out of killing him, but the end result of throwing him in the pit didn't seem to turn out so good either. But in reality, it did. Now, we have found, verse 32 says, we have found this. Do you know whether or not it is your son's tunic or not? They take the tunic back, got blood on it, and this is to cover the story that a wild beast had gotten them. And they look at Jacob and say, do you know if this is your son's tunic? Two things here. Number one, they knew it was his tunic, right? I mean, and the father would know that they knew. He wore it all the time. Number two, they didn't say, is this our brother's tunic? Is this your son's tunic? See how far the hatred had gone. They didn't even call him their brother. Is this your son's tunic? And think of how deceitful and wicked their heart is. They knew this would crush their father. But in their hearts, they was happy to bring this thing back and show it to him and say, whose tunic is this? Is this your son's? Well, they knew it was. And they knew their father was going to be hurt. But the thing of it is, they didn't care. Why is that? Because, like Paul said, they had passed the feeling of being sinful. I hope there's nobody here in that condition. If you are, you're probably lost. And you should have walked down and got saved today. You know what? There's people in church that way. Don't ever kid yourself. There are people in church that have passed the feeling of knowing what sin is. And it's become a habit. That's why we're to tell our children and our grandchildren. That's why we're to be witnesses where we go. Think about this. If someone who would have gotten to that young 20-year-old and he come to know the Lord, he would have never tried to kill Donald Trump. But more importantly, he would not have been killed. He'd be living for the Lord. These people that don't believe in God and will not hear the gospel and turn away from it, they just don't know where they're putting themselves. They're in control by Satan. You know, not all people will turn that way, but all people will sin. Verse 33. And he, Jacob, recognized it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. Now listen to this. And his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted, for he said, for I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. How wicked and deceitful can a heart be? Here you see it. Imagine the pain of the father losing his beloved son and the manner in which he was supposedly killed, ripped to pieces. Now, that didn't happen, but Jacob believed it happened. And when he believed it happened, as far as he was concerned, it had happened. He was dead. And it was his favorite son. And it was the son of promise, really. How wicked can a heart get? So he tore his clothes. That was the greatest sign of sorrow. Kind of like the Hulk. He tore his the other night. I happened to see that. All his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him. Now, I believe the daughters comforted him. It was in their heart to do that. But the comfort they were receiving from their son was false. They were pretending. Oh, yes, I'm a great pretender. And then their song goes that way?
Yeah.
Well, that's the title of Joseph's brothers. Pretending to comfort their father. Hey, listen up. There's a lot of pretenders in church. And they're pretending to love the Father. And they don't. Be careful who you listen to on radio and TV, and some of them are great pretenders. They can pretend enough to get the money. Not a bit of difference from what happened here. The sons was, I think, 20 shekels of silver for turning their brother over. Joseph wasn't dead, but as long as Jacob believed he was, as far as he was concerned. And this is a reminder to us too, that if Satan can make you believe a lie in your mind, that lie will become true. It won't be true, but it will be true to you. And it'll be hard to get that truth out of your head. The greatest lie told to a believer today is that you have to work for your salvation. I'm so glad when I got saved in a Baptist church that taught me I'm saved and I'm saved forever, and there's no work involved in this salvation. There's a lot of people taught that today, and they don't have the peace you and I have. Can you imagine living and thinking every sin you do is going to send you back to hell? No, not back, we hadn't been there, but send you to hell. Back where you're not, where you used to be headed. But there's people who live that way and they're not living in peace. It's a miserable existence, would have to be. That is the greatest lie Satan has given a Christian. And because when you're that way, you're not effective. You're not a good influencer, as we learned this morning. So finally, in verse 36, now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Now is the beginning of an extraordinary life of an extraordinary individual. Joseph is as close of a Christ type as you can get. His faith is triumphant. He arrives in Egypt when it was a large and thriving kingdom and has been for at least 1,000 years. The Egyptians were wealthy, had massive natural resources. They were educated, had no real enemies at the time. And this would prove to be where God wanted Joseph to be. And as we will see in the following chapters, Joseph will become very, very important. And so much so that you could really say he saved the nation of Israel before it was ever a nation. He saved them. Incredible story. Class is going to be dismissed right after I pray. Father, thank you for Joseph. Thank you for the story that we see to learn from. And what we really learn, Father, is that Satan is always at work. He's always at work to destroy the plans that you have put forth. And if he can stop anyone from receiving your Son as Savior, he will do that. And he will do it, making it look pleasant. So, Father, we pray for those who are lost, that as we approach the end of time, your Spirit will grow stronger, and that we'll be obedient in telling others about your Son. Thank you for all you do. Most especially, thank you for Jesus. And it's in his name I pray. Amen.
Amen.